Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another session of the World Creativity and Innovation Week. This is your moderator, Andrew Weiss, and we are very excited for our next session with Stacy and Ellen. But first, for those who are tuning in, we want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors to help make this event possible in the first place. Thank you so much to Haggerty Digital and My Favorite Art Place for making this event a reality. We're very blessed and grateful to be able to be all here today and keep learning more. For our next session, we are going to be learning from Ellen and Stacy. And just so you get a little bit more context, Ellen and Stacy, they're putting together educational practices and policies regarding curriculum, behavior management, and classroom structures that have created gender disparities in achievement. Boys' underachievement and literacy is an international cause for concern and can be seen across all race and socioeconomic subgroups. The Pinellas Education Foundation recognized this disparity years ago and in partnership with Pinellas County Schools has stepped in to create a stronger awareness of the problem and tools and strategies to elevate academic achievement among boys. Speaking today is Ellen Bayer, the CEO of Pinellas Education Foundation, and Ellen Truskowski, the Director of Student Demographic Assignment and School Capacity for Pinellas County Schools. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Stacy and Ellen. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you very much. Let me get set up. Give me 1 second. There we go. I think we've got it. Thank you so much, Andrew, for having us here today. Ellen and I are really excited and appreciative of the opportunity to share some of the work of the Pinellas Education Foundation in partnership with Pinellas County Schools. Before we get started, I just want to share a little bit about who the Pinellas Education Foundation is and the kind of work that we do. I think it might be helpful to just sort of level set. So our foundation has been in existence for almost 35 years. And during that time, we have a coalition of business and community leaders who are deeply interested and passionate about making sure that we have the best public education system in the nation. And part of the way that we have done our work and sort of the unique attributes of the Education Foundation is really to look at opportunities that, but for the Education Foundation sort of engaging in this work, it might not happen. And this is where the gender work squarely falls into that box. When the Education Foundation got started, I think one of the really key elements was that the foundation was focused on opportunities that we could bring and innovation that we could bring to our district that would be very unique and kind of serve as a pilot for initiatives that might be able to grow beyond just Pinellas County Schools. One of the early initiatives that we embarked on was Enterprise Village, which is a place where all fifth grade students in Pinellas County Schools come and visit and learn about how businesses interact with each other and how the free enterprise system works. And so after participating in a 4 to 6 week curriculum, the students actually come and spend a day here in our building at the Stavros Institute and take on different roles within a community. So you might be a banker, or you might be a television producer, and they learn about how these different businesses interact with each other. The other initiative that we're known for across the state of Florida is something called Take Stock in Children. And it's a scholarship program that we started about 27 years ago to help low-income students who were graduating significantly behind their higher income peers. And what we saw is if we could give sort of a carrot, a golden nugget of hope at the end of high school graduation, but set up these kids early in 6th grade with that incentive to know if they stayed on the right path and they had a mentor who would help guide them throughout their educational process, not only would see increased graduation rates, which these students, and we have about 1,000 of them a year in K-12, are graduating at 97, 98%. But they would also have the promise of a college scholarship and really a life-changing experience to go on to post-secondary education. So maybe you're asking yourselves, why are you spending some time on this gender webinar, sharing with us a little bit about that trajectory of the Education Foundation? And the reason why I think it's so important this is why we're doing this webinar today. This gender work that we started, really came from a set of research where we began to dig in on why boys and girls were achieving at different levels particularly in elementary school in literacy, and what could we do about it. And now that we've had some time digging in on this particular issue and beginning to experiment a bit with different strategies and figuring out what's actually moving the needle, we're sort of at the place in time where we're ready to start sharing the good work and sharing the tools and opportunities that we have, so that we hope that something that has started here in Pinellas County can actually grow and have impact outside of just Pinellas. But before we get started, I wanted to play a video so that we could sort of level set a bit about the why behind this the work we're doing with boys. So hold on one second, because it is going to require me to do a different screen share. All these Zoom meetings really test out for me my skill set in this space. So hold on one second. Let me, I got to get to a different one. Hold on. Well, I'm going to have to do this differently. Here we go. Can you hear that?
Yes, we can.
So interestingly enough, I actually could not hear that video, but but let me see. Actually, I can't seem to get my PowerPoint. Oh, there we go. So I just want to spend a moment and kind of get some reflections that you have after watching the video. If you can open up the chat. Did anything surprise you? Did anything resonate with your thinking? And what are some of the key takeaways that you may have had? If anyone wants to just share sort of their initial reactions. We'll wait just a minute.
Yeah, one of the audience members said the number of boys versus girls that are labeled. And I know for me, definitely what surprised me is the uptick in boys living at home versus no uptick with girls living at home, even though all millennials complain about how much more difficult it is to make a livable wage and have a livable housing, but it doesn't seem to affect boys, which is interesting too.
Yes, I'm a mom of 3 boys. And so watching these videos and reading more about the research, it has made me somewhat nervous for my kids and sort of what does their future look like and how important it is to intervene at a really young age. And another participant said the suicide rate with 80% being boys. You know, I'm looking at even some of these, you know, unfortunate mass shootings that we're seeing. They're being perpetrated by boys and by males. And, you know, what is going on in society that we might be able through work like this address some of these. So let me keep going because I want to make sure Ellen, who has the most important information to share, has a chance. We also wanted to share one more video, and of course my PowerPoint is not responding. Oh, there we go. About sort of what the work in Pinellas County, what a difference it's making to the teachers and the principals at a particular school, Woodlawn Elementary, that has seen some of our greatest gains. So let me find that one. Actually, hold on one second. I need to go back a second. Give me just 1 second. Sorry about that. Give me just 1 second. I had to close the video when I went out a minute ago. And so let me just reset it up. All right, now I think, give me a sec, I think, oh, nope, that's not it. Hold on 1 minute. Sorry about this. Give me just 1 quick second. I want to make sure I've got the right. Yep, okay. Now I can go to screen share again.
Hosted an awareness campaign around.
Let me just make sure I've got the video. Yep. Set up and maximize the screen and hit play. Let me know if you can't hear this.
The Pinellas Education Foundation hosted an awareness campaign around reading proficiency with our boys. So boys across the state, typically, and our district has included the same, read at a level about 10% less proficient than their female peers. So if you're looking at things like FSA, the Florida Standards Assessment that our students take in grades 3 through 10, boys score 10 points less than girls do on the FSA. And so the foundation came and said, you know, this is an issue in our district, it's an issue in our state, and there are specific strategies that you can use that actually will help to offset these deficiencies for boys. Initially, it was a campaign to say, hey, you know, does the district know this is an opportunity to close a gap? And so we engaged with them and started to say, what are some ways that we can perhaps educate our teachers, educate our schools to close this gap between girls and boys?
So the unique aspect of the Education Foundation is we have the opportunity to go in on some of these kind of more unique topics and really raise community awareness about the opportunities that exist for closing the gap between the genders, and actually bring some private resources to bear to create innovative solutions for how we might be able to change the outcomes for students.
When you think in terms of a child reaching his or her potential, you've got a three-legged stool. You have sort of family support, then you're going to need school support, and then I honestly believe you need the business community support. We have a vested interest in seeing our students perform well academically because they're going to become our future employees. And so the fact that the district wanted to partner with the Education Foundation, which is comprised of top business leaders, it makes perfect sense, and we're seeing tangible results.
So Woodlawn is one of the 6 pilot schools that first began this Closing the Gap process. And at Woodlawn, they really got a lot of teachers engaged in learning about these strategies and some of the brain and science based behind boys learning, and then using these in their classes.
I knew that it would be something really great for our scholars, so it was great to get new strategies to implement with what we were kind of already working with, but it is super helpful because our boys really excel through all of these different things being added into our lessons to kind of keep their attention and keep them working and on pace.
I'm really excited, especially because school used to look so different. You know, it used to be rows and sit and yes, and you just do your work all day, and now it looks so different that I love that they're able to come in and really support us and see what a classroom looks like today.
I know the importance of education. I know the importance that an educator can have on a child. And so the foundation is about equipping these terrific teachers, giving them the tools to bring the best out of our children. And I'm honored to be a part of it.
All right, let me go back to our, actually, let me do this real quick. Let me just, oh, no, that wouldn't work. You can tell you'd think after a year I'd be an expert in Zoom, but I'm really not. I'm learning as we go. Okay. So as you can see, the work has really evolved. Oops, I just lost my AirPod. And it is, can you hear me all right? Okay, so as you can see, the work has really evolved with our schools, and we have been very blessed with 2 key community leaders, Mr. Jim Myers, and Mr. Sebastian Dortch. Both have been very committed to this issue since we got started. I think it was in about 2014. So let me take you through a couple of the actions before I turn it over to Ellen to go a little bit more deeply into the actual work that we're doing with teachers and students. So this really got started as we began to unearth some of the statistics that you saw in the video, but also looking at some of our own local data around how boys were underperforming girls, particularly in literacy in elementary school. And we really honed in on that because believing if we could sort of right that ship earlier, we would have greater success with boys as they go down the pathway. So we did some research, and we actually came out with a white paper that we then began holding community convenings and trainings with teachers and trainings with other district administrators to just really raise awareness that this was even a problem. And while there has been a lot of attention paid to different subpopulations of students and sort of the performance gaps that exist, maybe based on race and ethnicity or income, high income versus low income, there really had not been much conversation around the disparities that were existing between boys and girls. And what we found is in elementary school, you can begin to identify those disparities, but they were following students all the way up through high school graduation. Then we started working on tools, and Ellen's going to go a little bit more into this around one particular tool that we developed called the Super Reading Rubric. But it was a way for schools to begin to self-assess kind of where they were, how were they supporting both girls and boys, specifically based on research, brain-based strategies of how you engage and get the best out of both genders. Next, we moved into really professional development and coaching. And I would say we sort of ran, we had two different pathways. First, we focused on literacy training that had been shown, literacy training with teachers that had been shown to make a difference in outcomes for boys. But then kind of as we evolved, what we decided to do is really focus on training teachers on the brain-based strategies and how boys and girls learn differently so that they could go back and apply those in their classrooms. It was sort of like the, where could we add value? So there was other literacy, other training happening around how to help students in reading strategies, but there wasn't really a lot of training happening with teachers around gender-based instructional strategies. So that's kind of where we began to turn a corner and sort of the path that we're heading down now. We initially started with 12 pilot schools. We actually brought it down to 6, and we've grown back to 10 elementary schools. But our superintendent and our district is really pushing us to think more broadly about how can we bring this education, awareness, and training to more teachers across the entire school district. And just for some level setting, our district is about 100,000 students, about 140 school sites. So as you can see, maybe 70 plus elementaries. So we have a lot of opportunity for impact across thousands of students. So our next phase that we're beginning to talk about is creating a micro credential that we could offer to teachers from throughout the district beyond just the 10 schools where we are working much more intensively. So let me turn this over to Ellen, who can go into more of the very specific strategies that we've been doing and some of the outcomes.
Okay, well, thank you. Just make sure we're set. So I'm going to start off. Can you see my screen? It's hard to tell.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to start off talking a little bit about our successes. So what you're seeing with the bar graph is the difference between 2 years in the proficiency gaps between boys and girls. And then you're seeing the difference between the state, Pinellas, and then Woodlawn. Unfortunately, we kind of had COVID come in, so the 1920 is a little bit different because we were using FSA or state high standards testing for this particular data point. We also have some impact that shows Woodlawns. It's the second year. They were chosen as a showcase school based off of these results. There's also been a major decrease in the gender gap. A large part of this is using the tool that we're going to go a little bit more in depth shortly. But we've seen similar changes or results in other pilot schools as well. If you look on the graphic on the left, you can kind of see Belcher, which is one of the next schools we're going to be highlighting as part of our showcase visit, has also been seeing some great results. And other schools we've seen with the teacher implementation. So as you heard in the video, there is a lot of positive outcomes. There's a lot of positive reactions to the trainings that we are providing and the efforts and the difference that it's making. So Stacey referenced a little bit about what we call the Super Reader Rubric, and this was done partially with a lot of the different research, the Curry Institute, Eric Jensen, there's a long list of other research that's in this, but also working with Lit Life, really looking at 3 different main categories and then dividing up into subcategories. So we really are focusing on 3 main areas. developmental considerations, and this is the physiological development. And it is a little bit different based on gender. When girls typically begin to be verbalizing or speaking compared to boys, the number of words they can read, the number of words they talk. So really looking at what are some of those differences so that we could look at, are we labeling this child when we shouldn't be, or are we really looking at where they're at brain developmentally wise with that lens to know that it's just a matter of differentiating the instruction, looking at the social emotional development component, and then relationship building. And this is a big one for boys in our classrooms and our schools, is making sure they have that sense of belonging. The second focus area is instructional environment, and that we're really looking at classroom libraries. So are we finding books that are interesting our boys? Do we have high interest? Are we taking their considerations or their input into consideration when we're purchasing these? Looking at the physical environment. There's been a lot of different research studies that show boys need more space or room. So are we creating that? There's some physiological differences where sometimes face-to-face or eye-to-eye can automatically signal a defense mechanism. So are we taking that into consideration when we're designing the setup of our classrooms? And then responsive instruction. So are we taking the way that boys and girls react to stress or emotional situations? Are we taking that into consideration when we're coming up with how we're responding to different behaviors we see in the classroom? And the other one is motivation and engagement. And this is another key area with getting our boys involved and motivated in that learning component, making sure that we're offering equitable engagement. There's some studies out there that show that teachers will call on boys more than girls. So are we coming up with ways to make it fair? Because our girls certainly notice when that happens. Also, investment in mindset, and then voice and choice, really allowing our students' interest and the students to have choice. And that's really key. Part of our foundation course, we go a little bit into some of the brain structures and the chemistry and the different aspects of any human being. And so voice and choice produces serotonin, which is that feel-good, calming chemical or neurotransmitter that's released. So a lot of these different areas, are we taking this into consideration when we're setting up our lesson plans and designing our classroom instruction? So we're going to do a little bit of a game. I'm going to ask you to go to nearpod.com. So you're going to type in joinnearpod.com, and there is a code I8BMH, and we're going to play a little game to see what your current awareness or level is of some of those gender differences. And let me get to that right screen.
What's the code, Ellen?
Sorry, I8BMH. Let me put that screen back up. So if we have people joining, we will see them. We have one person. We have two people. So I'm just going to go ahead and start just so you can kind of see. One of the things we talk about is gamification, which is turning things into competition and naturally engaging our boys. going to do one or two just for sake of time, so you kind of get the idea. But we'll turn into, let me get this. We'll use gamification as one of the ways that we engage our boys for that. Some of the different other ones, I just wanted to kind of show a little bit more in depth as far as what it goes to. And then, as Stacy said, a lot of the schools will use this as a self-evaluation. And then for the school improvement plans, they'll actually look at and choose one or two of these areas to focus on for the year. There's rationale in there, but a lot of our training is now focusing off of this model. So we're using the rubric to help guide what we're training for. So moving forward, we hope to increase the number of schools and teachers directly impacted each year. We're expanding professional development for all district staff. We've started to have behavior specialists show up in summer school, our summer trainings. We've had middle school teachers, high school teachers. We've had some administration. So it's really, word of mouth is starting, and it's really starting to impact and grow. Each year we see more staff coming, and then more staff of different, not just in those 10 pilot schools. We're also looking at a micro-credential program for teachers. And this is something that in Pinellas County, we already have a gifted micro-credential and we have an equity micro-credential. And what it means is there's a set number of courses or professional development a person takes before they get that micro-credential. And we're really hoping that that's going to go district-wide as well. We do a coaching model. So not only do we do PD, we're actually in the schools working with the teachers, coaching, co-teaching, sometimes working with professional learning communities to do one or two strategies and helping make that happen. As I said a little bit with the micro-credential program, it's a multi-year. So it's not just like a one and done, but it's continuing that growth in different areas. So we have set courses in the beginning that are basically the foundational courses. So we're looking at the brain and cognitive development and social development, emotional development, just to get a better understanding of the child themselves. All these are very good for boys and help engage, but they're also good for girls. So our work is not just, yes, we want to see that gap decrease, but we're also looking at supporting and engaging our girls as well. So that first phase is that 21 hours of the different training. And then the phase 2 is they'll have that voice and choice. So we want to model what we're doing in our classrooms and give the different participants or cohorts who are in that some choice in which areas do they want to learn more about. And once again, all of that is tied back to that tool that PEF was so instrumental in helping create. So at this time, we're going to open it up to any questions you all might have.
All right, Ellen and Stacy, thank you so much. It's very insightful to hear about the progress you've been making and exciting for the future. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to type it in the chat box or in the Q&A section. We'd love to hear from you as Stacy and Ellen are taking their time to talk about their progress, and I'm sure they'd be happy to help provide their insights. And it looks like one of the questions that came in is, are there any other districts who do this type of work?
So I came from Hillsborough, who don't do this type of work specifically. They have a couple single gender programs. I kind of like Pinellas County's focus a little bit more because it's looking at all classroom teachers and all students, not just ones who would be at a single gender program. There are some districts outside of the state who focus on working a little bit with the Gurian, but this is a very unique model that I haven't really seen anywhere else, and their approach and how they're going about decreasing those gender gaps.
The other thing I'll add is that we're actually getting some traction in the Florida legislature to put together a statewide task force to look at this issue across the entire state. Now, what will that involve? Not sure, but I'm hoping that it'll have a higher ed angle, a teacher preparation angle, looking at professional development that's happening in K-12 schools, maybe even looking at some early education opportunities for teachers who are working in schools before kindergarten. But I think the fact that our state is prioritizing this and looking at ways to take it beyond just Pinellas County is real positive.
Positive. And another question come in is, how do the boys' gender strategies impact girls?
In our work, we focus on 4 what we call non-negotiables, that every student needs access to water. And it's more from just dehydration, but it actually will help with the learning process. It helps with calming down if there's an emotional situation, adding structure, connections, and movement. And all of those, they're good strategies they're best practice strategies for all students, but they're particularly will engage our boys, but they're good for all. We do offer courses and stuff for the girls as well, so understanding them. So it's not a totally focus on the boys. We're looking at all of our students, but we're really keen on how do we get that motivation and engagement going to get our boys involved in wanting to be a part of classes and reading and literacy.
Yeah, makes sense. Another question is, how has COVID impacted this work?
So it put a stopper to the in-person PD and lessons. So as anyone, we've had a pivot, we've walked back, we've examined it. We're doing virtual PDs. We've done PDs on how do you adapt it to a virtual situation. And then I've also offered different trainings on COVID impacted classrooms. So for example, just because they're virtual, or if it's simultaneous where the kids are in the classroom and you have them online at the same time, how can you take some of these strategies and modify them so that they can still be useful and impactful? So we've done a lot of training and working with teachers that way on here's what it could look like if you're doing simultaneous with them both in person and online. Here's what it would look like if you're doing it just virtually. Here's what it would look like if you have them in class, but we're physically distancing them for safety measures. So we've come up with different modifications. We're going to be doing a best practices virtual showcase in late May. We're going to actually have the schools and the teachers themselves talk about how they've been able to take this work and what does it look like this year with the impact of COVID.
Oh, yeah, I know it pivots to definitely happens. That's good to hear that you guys didn't give up and kept moving forward. So that's definitely good news. Another question we had come in was, can you talk more about what strategies that parents of boys can use to help their boys and help make it easier for teachers essentially?
Sure. There's a couple things that I know when I grew up, they'd say, look me in the eye when I'm talking to you. And there's been some studies done with the amygdala, where for males in particular, direct eye contact can sometimes automatically flare that fight, flight, or freeze response. So while you're teaching, and there is a time and place for that, but if their emotions are involved and are getting upset, one of the things you want to avoid saying is look me in the eye and talk about that. Well, you would do more of a side to side or shoulder to shoulder conversation. It takes that innate threat feeling away and you can get more into it. If you give them water, sipping water has been shown within 5 minutes to reduce cortisol levels. So boys or girls, either. Gives them time to calm down a little bit, but also gives them time to process and think. So instead of just getting the shoulder shrug of what's going on, they may actually have a little bit of time. When those cortisol levels go down, the stress levels go down, it doesn't impact the amygdala as much, and the brainstem, which is that fight, flight, or freeze. And then movement. So if you walk and talk, you'll get so much more. If you're doing a shoulder to shoulder, the boys will be able to respond more, even the girls will respond. But a lot of that's going to lower cortisol levels, which is going to lower the stress levels. You're going to get more from them, and it helps diffuse the situation. Throwing a ball in that also impacts as well. So I know my sister, I would test out, she's got boys, and she now finds that they'll go out and shoot hoops if something's bothering them. And by the end of like that, she gets more out from them than typical conversation with that. So there's a lot of little tricks to the trade, like movement, the water, the walk and talk, all of that kind of comes into play underneath those 4 non-negotiables. So they can be adapted not just for the classroom, but also for parenting.
That is fascinating. I had no idea that you can't make eye contact if when boys are in high alert, because it helps trigger those responses. That's fascinating. And then with the water and the movements, you said those work for girls too, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, make sure I'm staying on top of the questions here. Yes, another person asked, if people from other educational institutions outside of Pinellas want to contact the district for information, who would they reach out to and how would they go about doing that?
So I would probably be the main contact with it. And I think my contact information is included with the bio information. We have had Hillsborough County come over for some trainings in the summer. So we do allow or work with some other districts that way as well with that. But just reach out to me and then we can look at what we're being offered. And I would say we could post out information about that best practices. That's going to be on May 27th, and we would welcome other districts or other people interested in the work to join us for that event. And that'll be at 3:30 p.m. on May 27th.
And can you put your contact information in the chat as well, just for the people who are here currently, in case they're chiming in? Yeah, and this has been very helpful. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that either of you wanted to talk about or mention in more detail that you didn't get a chance to at all? Because we still have a few minutes before the next presentation, but just want to make sure that you're not holding back on anything.
No, I don't have anything else to add, but I'll add my contact information to the chat as well, in case anyone's interested in any of the resources or tools that I talked about, the research report, or keeping on top of how the private sector community is supporting this, or the legislative work.
And I will tell you the support from Pinellas Education Foundation is phenomenal. Their advisory committee, their dedication to this, I don't think our county would be in as good a shape and as good without the support from that. So it's been a blessing to have their input, guidance, and advice as well as the support that they've been giving financially, as well as just all other aspects. But it's been a blessing.
Oh, it's great to hear. All right, well, final call for questions. Otherwise, Stacy and Ellen, thank you so much for helping to shine insights on this issue and how you're making progress on it. And also want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors for making this event a reality. Thank you so much to Haggerty Digital and My Favorite Art Place. And with that said, Ellen and Stacy, I want to move you to an attendee, and thank you again for coming by today.
Thank you.